welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, we're going to get into something that, honestly, it's been bothering me for a little while, especially with the reports that get in or the communities that I listen to, not just in the States, but literally all over the world. It's not the kind of thing everyone's going to want to hear or even like to hear, but it's something we actually need to talk about if we care about the spaces we're a part of, if we care about the people that are around us. Today, I'm going to be talking about drinking and substance use and how they're becoming more common in dungeon spaces and event spaces. And as different lifestyles blend, polyamory, swinging, and how these are connecting and becoming more part of the blend inside of BDSM, the culture and the consent around it, the autonomy, the personal responsibility, and how this is all starting to shift, and not for the better. Now, I realize this is going to ruffle some feathers today. None of this is an attack. This is just outright, me looking at this like I do for the rest of you. Now, before I really get into this, I want to take a second and thank my growing listener base. Spotify alone, I've just now peaked over 2,500 active followers. I appreciate all of you. With all of my channels that I have out, plus YouTube, I'm closing in on almost 4,500 people that follow the show. So there's obviously a lot of support here. You see the conversations, you want to be a part of them, you want to see how it's shaping everything we do inside of our lifestyle and the areas that we're connected to. I really do appreciate this more than you know. And if you like what you hear, I just ask, take a second, rate the show on Spotify or, and like and subscribe wherever you follow your other podcasts. Or if you're over on YouTube, you want to, hit the little bell, make sure you're following along. So every week when a new show drops, you're able to, keep up and follow along. If you want to support the work I do here, there is a donation link in the description of the show. Anything big or small is always appreciated. It helps me keep this show going. Ad-free. I'm not trying to sell you anything back. I'm not trying to take information from you, create something, and then sell it back to you. I'm not doing this, there's no merchandise, none of that stuff. This is me, pure and honest. One of the only shows that actually discusses psychology and BDSM. Right? It's really important for us to know that, right? So, these conversations that we're having, they matter. And today's conversation matters because when you start normalizing drinking in spaces built on negotiation, built on trust, built on clear-headed consent, you start eroding the very foundation that all of these spaces are built in. Now, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. You want to drink? Fine, you're an adult. You want to party? That's fine, you're an adult. But when you bring that into a dungeon, when you bring that into the community where people are trusting one another, where, there's real power exchange going on, real vulnerability becoming present, then it's not just your choice anymore. It's everybody's risk. And if we're honest, and I'm going to be today, there are a lot of people right now who are pretending this is not a big deal because it makes, the social side of things a lot easier. It smooths out the awkwardness. It lowers our inhibitions. Right? But it also lowers boundaries, it clouds our judgment, and it makes real consent a hell of a lot harder to recognize and honor. And we're going to talk about today why this matters, what the risks are here, and why why is it this time we stop, letting it just be a little bit about fun, right? That's an excuse for reckless behavior in spaces that demand better from all of us. Now, first, what I want to do here is I want to talk a little bit about some history, a little bit of our foundation of the lifestyle. So to really understand why this conversation matters, we have to step back and remember where our roots are from. When dungeons and communities first began organizing and were forming, the rules were pretty clear. There was no drinking, there's no drug use, there's no altered states of consciousness. These weren't arbitrary restrictions, they were boundaries built from necessity. BDSM is a practice rooted in power and vulnerability and trust. It demands that people step into these roles with a clear mind and a steady hand, right? Because when you exchange power, when you invite someone into your physical and emotional reality, you're taking a risk. And real consent requires full awareness. And I feel like I talk about consent a lot, but there's a reason here, because it requires that both parties are capable of understanding what's being asked, what's being agreed to, and what the potential consequences are. Now, early community leaders, even when I was around, when I started getting involved in the lifestyle a long time ago, they understood something that many people today are just simply forgetting. If you allow impairment, even just a little, you erode the entire structure of consent. Your judgment's altered, your boundaries become blurred, and what someone agrees to under the influence may not just be, they may not have done that had they been sober. Once you introduce doubt into the validity of your consent, you introduce the risk of harm. Now, this is not just about a submissive or a bottom. It's equally about the dominant or top holding themselves to a higher standard. Negotiations were not casual conversations. They were intentional agreements. They're revisited and they're refined. They're made with an understanding that once you step into the scene, you're responsible for what happens to the person you're interacting with. Safety protocols, negotiations, even aftercare. All of these foundational practices depend on clarity and accountability. The early communities all knew that. They protected it fiercely because they understood that the second you lower the standards around sobriety, you lower the standards around safety. And when you lower the standards around safety, you make consent, true consent, impossible. And that was the expectation. That was the ethic. And it's the foundation for any community that wants to call itself responsible. And the difference is now is that I see a lot of these communities, and it's not really a dig at younger generations, but what I'm going to dig at are the newer people coming into the lifestyle. Age, not really, the age factor doesn't really bother me. It's more so that people coming in that don't have a foundational structure, let alone want to put effort into understanding what we're doing, are spending their time bringing in other habits that are unhealthy, right? So let's talk for a moment here about how different lifestyles are colliding, because I think that's kind of important to understand, right? I want to make something really clear what I'm about to say. I'm not attacking, this is not going to be an attack on polyamory. It's not an attack on the swinging community. Every community has its own history. It has its own culture. It has its own stratas and its own reasons for gathering the way they do. There's nothing inherently wrong with people finding intimacy, connection, or meaning in ways that work for them. What I do want to focus on is not the lifestyles themselves, but what happens when these different cultural norms begin to merge inside of spaces that were built for very different reasons and purposes. Now, as event spaces grow and communities evolve, we're seeing more crossover between BDSM, polyamory, and the swinger populations. Now, that crossover can be positive in a lot of ways. It brings new people into the conversation around consent, self-awareness, and sexual authenticity. But it also brings with it different expectations about what it means to socialize, to negotiate intimacy, and to even manage risk. In many general social spaces outside of BDSM, alcohol is often viewed as a normal part of gathering. It's treated casually as a way to relax, to lower social anxiety, and create a sense of ease in vulnerable conversation that works well enough in centered contexts. It does not work well in spaces that depend on absolute clarity of mind, emotional precision, and negotiated power exchange. Now, before I go any further, I want to talk about a couple of things I've read over the last couple of weeks. And the reason why this conversation started, and it was actually kind of a client inspired this, and we even talked a little bit about this recently. And, they said, well, what we do in BDSM is abusive anyways. But then I expanded on that. I said, not every scene we do, not every dynamic we do is inherently a form of abuse, because technically we have to recognize that. It's not DDLG dynamics, even suspension, that has roots in ritual beliefs. Not all of these things are considered the way sadism might be, right? In the areas that I inhabit. Now that's okay. Sorry guys, I have a little bit of a throat issue today, so I'm going to be kind of clearing it while we go. So I do apologize for that. But one thing I saw was I was reading about a swinging BDSM event in the UK, where it doesn't matter. A person publicly posted about it, and they were talking about how they were having an experience. It was female on female, and someone come up behind and did something. Now, first off, I'm not going into the did something and how that's been addressed and all of these things. First off, that's terrible. Shouldn't be touching. But the problem is that what I'm seeing in these dungeon spaces a lot in Europe, and it's popping up more and more in the States, is that alcohol is introduced. Now, when we do that, right, now it doesn't matter that one person wasn't drinking. What matters to me is that we allowed a person at that event to drink or consume alcohol and or other things. And I'm going to get to the drugs in a minute. And I am going to pick on something in the States, specifically Atlanta, where I started out. But anyway, this is not a dig. But when we do this, what's happening is we are lowering the risk. We're increasing risk for everybody else, and we're decreasing consent. And so things happened. This has happened in places like Belgium. This has happened in places like Austria, Germany, Argentina, right? It's all over the world. It's not just prevalent to a couple of countries that are constantly doing it. Now, some of you guys in Europe like to do this more. Some of your dungeons come equipped with full functioning bars. I don't know how, let alone my question is why. And I can tell you, these are spaces I would never inhabit. It's not a dig. It's not a personal slight. It's not because I think I'm better. It's because when you introduce alcohol, you are removing my ability to think clearly and 100%. Already in an environment that is highly stimulated, we're now taking something else and adding in more stimulation and lowering our expectations and our inhibitions to things we may question or may put a pause on. We're saying, yep, I'm in, right? So we're not thinking clearly. Now, let me get into the drugs thing for a second. Somebody had reached out to me and they were talking to me about an upcoming event in the Atlanta region, or it may have happened. I'm not really following that closely to Atlanta anymore, but starts with an F, right? And they already know that there are parties scheduled beforehand, like at hotel rooms. Now, we don't control these spaces. You do control whether or not you're going to go. And the event organizers have the responsibility. If someone comes in and they look like they're under the influence, they have the responsibility to turn them away. Now, what I have been hearing, whether it's true or not, don't know, and I'm not here to, pass judgment, is that these types of activities have been happening for a while. And at previous events, at Atlanta specifically, other places, down in Florida, yet again, I'm hearing, Florida, it's like I need to come down there and clean this all up for you and set you people straight, but I really don't have the time and I don't think you want to pay me that much money. However, if you are partaking in an event and you're like, I'm coming into town, so I'm going to grab some beer, don't go, don't drink. Why are you, first off, you're going to ruin it for yourself. I'm hoping you don't get let in because you're unsafe. You're telling me you're unsafe. If you need booze or you need a substance to go and play with somebody, you're unsafe, right? That is an attack because you're not a person that's making the right choices for the others that you interact with. I don't care if you're a submissive, if you're a dominant, if you're a switch. I don't care if you're a pup, a boot black, or anything in between. If you need something, some sort of substance, alcohol or otherwise, to walk into a dungeon, to walk into an event, to feel better, you're not being safe. You're not safe for yourself, and you're not safe with those who you interact with, right? BDSM spaces were never designed around casual intoxication. They were built to center on serious, sober negotiation where people could explore their vulnerability, their desires, the intensity, their sexual fantasies, their risks, and under conditions of maximum mutual awareness. Introducing alcohol into these environments, even with great intentions, changes the whole fundamental operating condition. It dulls judgment. It slows your reaction time. It impairs the very self-awareness that our practices depend on. The impact is not always is immediate or even obvious. It's often really subtle. Rules begin to feel more flexible here. Boundaries get reinterpreted through the lens of lowered inhibition. And when I was just talking about Florida a little bit ago, wasn't long ago, where I talked about what happened where somebody who didn't even need alcohol was already breaking people's boundaries. Can you imagine how much worse that would be if they had introduced this there? And perhaps they have. I don't know. I'm not, in that scene. But negotiations that would otherwise be sharp and deliberate become loose. They become rushed, or they're even worse, incomplete. Over time, the whole culture that made all of these spaces safe begins to collapse. And let me tell you, dungeon after dungeon right now is being sold or is closing because stuff keeps happening. And that's not me creating something out of nothing. On average, per week, I am reading about, I don't know, on the conservative side, 6 different incidents per week at dungeons around the world. Oh, an incident has happened. An incident has happened. Now, that's not even with something involved. Some have been. So all you're doing is when stuff isn't even present, stuff's happening. If you introduce alcohol into your spaces or drugs into your spaces, you're increasing that risk. And I can tell you, if I already know a dungeon isn't safe, if they're serving or allowing alcohol to be present or allowing intoxicated people to come in, I'm not going there. And I will tell everybody I know, I'm not going to be there, and I won't respect anybody going there. Because then you're not serious. Now, this isn't about placing any blame on any individuals or any lifestyles. If it's about understanding here. The reality when cultural practices mix, and not every practice can or should be integrated without some thought, right? I'm sorry to burst everybody's bubble here, but BDSM and sex aren't synonymous. It's not against you swingers. It has nothing to do with you. I know you all like to have your sex and get it on, and that's fine. But that doesn't work without consent and negotiation inside of the lifestyle. So you can't walk into an event and start thinking, I'm going to just start, touching people or doing really inappropriate suggestions to people or all of these things, because that's what you do in the swinging environment. Or with poly, wanting to attach and share and spread your love. It's not what you do, right? It just doesn't happen. I'm not saying that these worlds can't coexist, but my lifestyle that I'm a part of is BDSM is its own lifestyle. Poly is its own. Swinging is its own. We have to remember, if you're going to interact with each other, we all have to actually respect the autonomy of each other's practices. And that is a real big thing. But every one of these practices I know still requires clear-headed negotiation, some sort of form of consent, and at least all of them, and more often than not, emotional awareness. All of these things inside of the BDSM sphere, they're non-negotiable. And if we want to keep these spaces trustworthy, we have to have some sort of rules here. And people think, God, you're just being a prude, Chris. Why would you even say this? You're not with it anymore. You know what? I'm more with it than most of you are. That's not a dig. It's because I take what I do as, like a lot of people that listen to my show or my very close-knit circle of friends, they take what we do inside of lifestyle seriously because we enjoy it. We love it. We don't want to see it destroyed, right? We want to protect it and keep it what drew us to it in the first place. But if you recognize the differences in these norms, it's not an attack. It's an act of stewardship here. It's a reminder that when we enter spaces built on these things, on consent and vulnerability and trust, we take on a duty to uphold the standards to protect everyone involved. And even if that means making harder, less socially comfortable choices, well, then that's what has to be done. If you're going to open up your space where you can just go booze up or snort up or inject or smoke up before somebody plays, you don't care. And I don't want to be a part of that. You don't care about the people coming in. And that goes for the space, the event providers, the event organizers, or anything in between. I won't even go to a private party if I know that they're drinking there. It's my request that it's put away. And that if anybody shows up intoxicated, that they are asked to leave. And people are going to say, oh, well, what about medications? I'm not feeling well. Then you shouldn't be playing. You're not at 100% capacity. When I play, I got asked the other day from a friend and a colleague, about pickup play. I haven't done pickup play. As a matter of fact, I don't do pickup play. There's so much involved in what I do in my private life. The reality is I need to take time to get to know somebody. I don't really know that many sadists that do pickup play because we don't know what somebody can take. That means we have to lessen what we're doing, and that's just not us, right? It's not a dig. It's not. It's just, that's why I don't do it. Now, there might be others out there that do. That's fine. If you want to elevate your risk, go right ahead. But I know if you're going to add in the element of alcohol or some sort of substance, you're reckless. And you and I don't inhabit the same world. That's not about being elitist. It's about being safe. And I chuckled when I say that because that's what I get told. You're just being elitist. You're a gatekeeper. No, I'm being safe. It's why in 26 years, I've never had a consent violation. It's why in 26 years, none of the people I know have ever had anything happen to them or have been accused of anything or have done anything. And it's why we all kind of just hang out together because we prefer that. We prefer being together so these outside things don't affect what we do and kind of infect it with that, right? It's not about elitism here or anything else. And I know people are going to say that. It's really not. But let's talk about some of these risks, right? Because consent here becomes unreliable. And one of the things that falls apart is when substances are introduced into our lifestyle spaces is consent right off the bat. And we have to remember consent's not a surface level agreement. It's meaningful, it's informed, it's deliberate, it's present, right? It's the kind that where both people know exactly what they're agreeing to and are capable of changing their mind in the moment if something no longer feels right. And if you introduce alcohol or drugs into that play, well, your judgment's impaired. Your memory can be distorted, emotional regulation drops. People say yes to things they don't fully really understand or may not have done if they were sober. And that's a big deal. That's the kind of impaired consent creates a whole foundation built in the sand. And in practice, where we deal with vulnerability and risk and emotional exposure and our fantasies, that's a liability none of us can afford to ignore. From a psychological standpoint here, substance weakens the whole brain's executive function. They make it harder to assess risk. They make it harder to remember our boundaries. They make it harder to stop. And when something feels wrong, well, we're not necessarily, saying, hey, don't do that. We're not calling our stop colors. We are just going with it. And someone might go into a scene thinking that they're fine, only to realize halfway through that they're completely overwhelmed and they find themselves too foggy or too disconnected to advocate for themselves. Consent under the influence becomes unstable. When that happens, everything following becomes questionable. And that's not how you build trust. That's how trust becomes broken. And currently, again, and I've said this in the past, I've looked into quite a few countries and laws. Pretty much all of them are the same. And that means the moment you start drinking, there's a problem with consent. They all have a consent or an impairment law. It becomes problematic. People are going to say, oh, well, people drink and hook up all the time. Yep. And guess what? What happens in a lot of those cases? Violation happens. Assaults happen, right? So let's get into some more of these risks. Let's talk about our loss of personal autonomy. Now, what is autonomy, Chris? Great question you ask. The ability for you to self-advocate, to change your mind, or to set limits in real time. And that's really essential in any scene that we're doing. And it's even more critical when we're talking about power exchange dynamics. When someone's impaired, they're going to lose touch with their own internal signals. A bottom might not say anything when something hurts, more than it should, or a sub might feel discomfort but override it, going along with something because speaking up feels a lot harder. A top, on the other side, they might misread body language or mistake compliance for active, enthusiastic participation. Now, that was a mouthful. Now, what starts out as negotiated can quickly drift into territory neither party truly wanted, simply because the ability to recognize and act on those needs is dulled. As a top, I am in command of a lot. I am delivering massive assault on somebody willingly or otherwise, or however the scene is being played out. I need to be clear. I need to look for a cue that I could miss if, hey, my eyes are a little fuzzy, my hearing's a little off, right? Let me add the psychology here. Substances lower your ability to critically think and increase your suggestibility. That means people are more likely to say yes to things just to go along, even when their body or their instincts are signaling discomfort. In a dynamic, it's, where clear and honest feedback is necessary to protect both of you, creates a dangerous blind spot. Autonomy is not just about what someone agreed to in the start. It's about the ability to maintain control over their body and their voice every step of the way. When that slips, the entire structure of the scene becomes unsafe, whether either party intended to or not. Another thing that this does, I'm mentioning it because, I seem to be reading about it a lot. Increased predator activity. It's a really, as hard as it is to face this, impairment does not just increase our vulnerability among our well-meaning and tension players. It draws in people who are predatory. Individuals who look for someone who's impaired, isolated, or uncertain are not rare. They exist in every community, not just a lifestyle or swingers or polys, right? When a space allows drinking or casual substance use without any hard limits, it's going to create an environment where predators can thrive. People who are intoxicated are easier to manipulate. They're less able to advocate for themselves, or often slower to recognize when something's wrong. They're less likely to report violations clearly with their memory, when their memories can be called into question later, which creates barriers to accountability. And let's be honest here, predators rely on confusion, doubt, and blurred boundaries. They know exactly how to operate in spaces where those things don't exist. And alcohol and drugs create a plausible deniability, the ability for someone to say, it was just a misunderstanding, or they seemed fine, even when the real harm was done. And communities that don't maintain these firm standards around sobriety make it easier for these dynamics to take root. And protecting against that reality means protecting the clarity of the space itself, not just trusting that everyone's intentions are good. It's about creating conditions where exploitation is harder, not easier. And the next thing we've got under, these assumed risks that can be increased. Accidents and even medical emergencies. Now, even under the best of circumstances here, our lifestyle carries risk. We work with physical stress, psychological intensity, and activities that push us and our minds, our bodies, to the edges of endurance and our limits. If we introduce something into that equation, it increases the chances of accidents and emergencies dramatically. First off, alcohol dulls your pain perception and it slows your reaction time, which means someone's not going to realize possibly that they're being hurt until the damage is done. Your physical coordination suffers at making something like complex rope work or suspension or intense, type of impact play more significant and more dangerous. If a top is impaired, they might misjudge the amount of force being used or fail to pick up on signs of distress in their partner. What about the medical side? Well, medical emergencies, when they happen, escalate faster under impairment. Breathing issues, circulation problems, fainting, panic reactions require immediate and sober intervention. Most dungeons are still not staffed with medical professionals. That's not for me to tell you to go out and take another class. First responders are great, but if you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be acting like a doctor, right? And I'm not saying you need to have a doctor present, but most of these events don't have rapid emergency response teams like paramedics. That means the responsibility to prevent serious harm falls on the people in the space themselves. Now, when someone's impaired, that safety net weakens. What might have been a manageable misstep under sober conditions can spiral into a critical incident when judgment and reaction times are compromised. Oh, Chris, you're being dramatic. Yep, I don't know what I'm talking about. Just look globally when these things happen, and then they get talked about, and then the staff and the organizations of the event, coordinators are all putting out, we're sorries and we're going to do better and we're going to review and we're going to take 28,000 victim impact statements. That doesn't stop what has already happened, and it doesn't erase the harm that's already been caused. And by the way, you're not going to get that trust back. The moment you could have done something and you didn't beforehand, and it's something really simple like not allowing this into your space, tells me you're not concerned. It's about you trying to make something while taking away from everybody else. If we allow substances to enter all of our spaces that are built on trust, negotiation, the risks don't just stay isolated to the people using them. They ripple upwards. They affect, partners, bystanders, the event organizers, the larger reputation of the community. Right? It's not just about personal choice. It's about collective responsibility. Maintaining sober spaces is not about moralizing or being inflexible. Come on, Chris, you're such a party pooper. No, I'm not. I've been doing this long enough that stuff, I don't need it. I don't need it to relax. I don't need it to feel better or play harder. And I have seen people over the years advocate. I remember there was this popular user on social media who advocated, and she was in Europe somewhere, I can't recall where, but she would always say, oh, before a scene, I would always drink 2 or 3 glasses of wine. And everybody would and she was like, I don't care, this is what I do. That tells me she's unsafe. I would want nothing to do with her. Eventually, I think she left the scene or went quiet, I don't really know. But the fact that you're advocating for it and you're open about it, you are signaling to the world you're an unsafe person, and I don't want to be with you. And this doesn't have anything to do with gender either, by the way. Anybody who drinks is unsafe. I don't care where you are in that whole thing, right? This is about recognizing that we owe it to ourselves and to each other to protect the foundation that makes our lifestyle possible. Conscious consent, full autonomy, and serious respect for vulnerability when we share, especially when we share in these spaces, and how we are choosing to play with each other. So what do we do and what do we need to change? Well, if we want to protect what makes this lifestyle different, what makes them worth having, we're going to have to start making some harder, clearer decisions around substance use. The first step is straightforward. It's not always easy. We need stronger and enforced rules around sobriety at serious play events. This means moving beyond suggestions and into real policy. No drinking before a scene. No drinking before you come to the event. No drinking before you enter the dungeon. No showing up impaired, right? If you're sick and you're on NyQuil, you shouldn't be playing, right? No substances that alter your ability to give or recognize any issues going on, including consent. These rules just can't exist on paper. They have to be enforced without hesitation. And I promise you, event organizers, if you do this, you'll be respected. You're creating the environment that you all are preaching about, but a lot of the times you are failing hard. And they have to apply equally to everyone, no matter how experienced, well-liked, or well-known somebody is. And alongside that, we need to do a much better job of clearly separating social mixers from play spaces. Not every event needs to be a dungeon, and not every gathering needs to be a play night. There is room for social time, right? Casual conversations, community building bonds. But it needs to be clear when the environment is about connection and when it's about serious play. When those lines get blurred, expectations get blurred, and that's when the problems start. A social event where people can have a drink and mingle is far different animal here than from a dungeon space where people are maintaining and doing scenes that involve risk like electric play or needle play. Keeping the purposes distinct protects everybody, right? Now, I talked about this a few weeks ago when I got into the whole sex offenders thing in play spaces. Vetting has to be taken seriously. Again, do more. Don't tell me you can't look when you get a list of people's names that are coming to your event and you can't look them up, right? Have they had problematic history in play spaces? There are things you can do to find out. It's your responsibility. You want to invite people into a space and charge for it and make money and profit from it? That's fine. You need to make sure that space is safe. Do they have a history or are they on a registry? You need to consider that. Are they known? Are they showing up and they smell like they just drank a fifth of Jack Daniels, right? And a lot of these spaces, vetting has gotten rushed, if it even exists at all. And that's not really a dig, it's just kind of the truth. And when you bring people into our environments without setting clear expectations for behavior or responsibility or even a consent culture, you're not building a stronger community, you're diluting it. Vetting is not about keeping people out because they're new. It's about making sure that everyone coming into the space here understands what's being asked of them. They need to understand the gravity of what consent actually means, the expectations around sobriety, and the whole personal responsibility that comes with negotiating real power exchange. Without that foundation, you're setting up people to fail, even if their intentions are good. And maybe most importantly here, we have to start reclaiming this whole spirit that this community was originally built on: responsibility for yourself, respect for others, honoring consent as a sacred thing that it is, not just a box you check on a form or on an app, right? But a living agreement that demands ongoing care. Our lifestyle is not just about scenes we create. It's about the trust we're willing to build and hold, knowing that every time we pick up a rope or a flogger or a needle or a paddle, or, word in our commands that we're giving to somebody, we're holding another person's safety, dignity, and autonomy in our hands. That's not something we can afford to handle with, casually. It never was. None of this is none of this is about going backward or gatekeeping for the sake of it. It's about protecting what matters. It's about remembering that these spaces exist because people needed spaces where their vulnerability would be treated with seriousness, where the risks that they have or they know they're about to enter are met with care, where consent could be honored not just in words but in action. If we lose that, if we let substances or alcohol or casual attitudes, plus lowered standards creep in, which have already taken place in a lot of communities around the world, we lose the heart of what it means and makes BDSM spaces different. And once that's gone, it's not going to be easy to get back. And let me be honest with you, that's why a lot of people have gone back underground. They're going back to private events in homes. You're never going to find me. People ask me all the time, "You're going to show up here?" Doesn't even matter if I say yes. First off, I'll never tell anybody. Second, now I've equated to kind of hiding my identity because I don't need people to know who I am or where I'm going. But a lot of times I inhabit spaces that are just with my circle, right? And there's about 16 of us. That's more than enough. We can do our own things, and we don't have to get involved in all of these other things that are, happening in communities because everybody's just kind of doing what they want to do at a pace that they want to do it. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. It's not about me thinking I'm better. I don't think I'm better than anyone. I still learn from so many people. It's not even funny. Because these people matter to me. Right? All these people matter when they teach me these things and we have these conversations. I want to learn and have a clear head. Look, I want to leave you all with this. Every single one of us who steps into a BDSM space carries a piece of responsibility for the culture we're a part of. Now, whether you're picking up a rope for the first time or leading a dynamic or picking up a paddle or learning to use needles, electricity, or anything else, you're just learning where you fit in here. You're shaping the community with the standards you hold. It's not about being rigid. It's about being intentional. The safeguards we build are not there to restrict the experience. They are what make it possible for trust, real vulnerability, and real connection to happen. Our choices, especially the small ones, they matter. Every time we set a boundary, every time we choose to be present and aware, every time we step up and protect the spaces we move through, we are either strengthening that foundation or letting it get worse. No community stays strong by accident. It stays strong because the people inside it choose to remember what it's built on. So I'm going to leave you guys with I'm going to pose a question. I'll put it up on social media. What kind of community do you want to help build? And more importantly, when the moment comes to choose between comfort and responsibility, which one are you actually willing to stand for? Now, I know this is a heavy subject today. I've talked about this before in the past. I'm revisiting it for a few reasons because, I keep lending my expertise and my help around the world, helping communities repair some of the damage from stuff like this, helping them gain awareness, helping them learn about the things they cannot do because of the damage it causes. Now, with that being said, I want to hear some feedback, what your thoughts are. Hey, Chris, you're being crazy, you're being a gatekeeper. If that's fine, if that's your attitude, tell me why. Support, argue your side. If you insult me, I'm kind of at a point now, I don't listen to that anymore. If you're directly just calling me names, that's not a discussion, that's just an attack. I don't do that, and I don't need that in my social media space. But if you want to take part in this conversation, you've got some stuff to say, great, let's do that. Now, I'm still working on, I want to apologize to Red Warrior. I'm going to get you on here. I promise. You have been so patient, and I want to bring you in. I am struggling just with time and everything else. My practice is busy, but we're going to get her in. We're going to have a sit down. We're going to have a really good conversation about leather and BDSM and so much more. She's a fantastic guest. She's spoken. She talks. She's she is a community leader in multiple locations. She speaks all around the U.S., right? So I'm going to bring her on the show, let you guys all know. I do have a book out. Thanks to a friend, I'm a little bit more confident putting that out. Once again, it is called Tangled Desires. It's the intersection between BDSM and psychology. It's wherever you want to get your ebooks from. There is a print version available. Look, it's a little repetitive. It's the first book I ever wrote. This is not, I didn't write the Iliad, right? It's not Homer. But I don't mind. It's all right. If you like it, you want to pick it up, maybe educate yourself a little bit more, hear about some things to talk about, please grab a copy, right? If you have some more suggestions, I'm trying to I've got about 15 different emails for suggestions for upcoming shows. I'm working on it, guys. That's the best I can do. I'm got something on the books. I'm going to talk to the person out in the Middle East. I haven't forgotten you, my friend. I promise you we are going to talk. We are going to have our conversation. That is very important. BDSM in the Middle East for me is such an interesting and fascinating experience. And the rest of the world, I really want you to understand that. And then it's going to be the second time I'm going to approach that. And we're all going to listen together, right? To all my bigger and growing audiences in the Latin community, hola and welcome, right? Bienvenidos. I want you here. I want you to keep asking me questions. Let's keep talking about trauma when those things come up. That question from the listener in Spain a couple of weeks ago, it was brilliant. And then that whole show was dedicated to him. And that just really affected me greatly and very profoundly. So yeah, let me know what you think about this episode. We'll go from there. If you've got anything else, please reach out to kinkperspective@gmail.com. You can get a hold of me there. And we'll, keep bringing this conversation and keep talking about how important or uncomfortable it is. And maybe, who knows, you'll start looking at your spaces a little bit differently if you are in an element where people are using alcohol or drugs when they're coming in. And maybe you're going to start reconsidering yourself, right? Until next time, everybody, be safe, stay kinky.